While seeing Sins of Our Mother, it's not difficult to predict the worst. The Netflix true crime series recreates the 2020 case of Lori Vallow Daybell, dubbed the Doomsday Mom, who's now awaiting trial for the deaths of her 2 children. The series follows Lori's tragic spiral into religious extremism, which began with her commitment to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and grew steadily. Lori believed her 17-year-old daughter and 7-year-old son were dark individuals and disciples of Satan, under the influence of her 5th husband, Chad Daybell, a former gravedigger turned apocalyptic novelist and self-declared prophet. Sins of Our Mother, a documentary series from the director of Abducted in Plain Sight and Girl in the Picture, follows Lori's surviving child, Colby Ryan, as well as her mother, ex-friends, and the investigators working on the ongoing investigation. The series recounts the Vallow Daybell murder and is a difficult watch, both for beginners to the case and die-hard fans. Here's a closer look at the suspects in question, the murder case, and recent updates. Who is Lori Vallow Daybell? Lori Vallow Daybell was born in 1973 in San Bernardino, California. She was described as a devoted mother of 3, a loving wife, and a woman of God. Vallow married 4 times, each time under a different name. Lori Noreen Cox was first known as Lori Noreen Cox, then Lori Ryan, Lori Noreen LaJoya, Lori Vallow, and finally Lori Vallow Daybell. She had 2 children from previous marriages, Colby and Tylee Ryan, and later adopted J.J. Vallow. Where is Lori Vallow now? Lori Vallow Daybell was born Lori Noreen Cox on June 26, 1973, in San Bernardino, California. Her 3 siblings, Adam, Alex, and Summer, were all raised in the Mormon Church. Lori married her high school lover, Nelson Yanes, when she was 19. However, the marriage was short-lived and ended in divorce. She married William LaJoya in 1995 when she was 22 and had her first child, Colby Ryan. The couple divorced 3 years later on February 25, 1998. Lori remarried her 3rd husband, Joseph Anthony Ryan, in 2001, and he's the biological father of her 2nd child, Tylee Ryan. Lori claims Joseph assaulted her and physically and sexually abused Colby, forcing Lori to file for divorce. Quote, "There's a turning point in my life that turned to the temple. I had been married to someone who was very awful, who raped my children," Lori said in an old voice recording. "And I was going to murder him. I just thought I couldn't take it anymore. So I went and met my bishop, and I was like, I'm either going to turn my life to the temple or I'm going to commit murder." In 2006, Lori got married to Charles Vallow, making him her 4th husband. Joshua J.J. Vallow, who was Charles's sister's grandson, was adopted by the couple after they had been married for 7 years. J.J. suffered from autism, yet despite this, he developed strong relationships with Colby and Tylee, the latter of whom regularly spoke to J.J. as if he were her own child. Lori and Chad's relationship. Despite having the longest marriage to Charles, Lori was dissatisfied with him and frequently told her closest friends that she did not view Charles as her spiritual equal. Lori met Chad Daybell, her soon-to-be 5th husband, in 2018 and promptly fell in love with his harsh apocalyptic and catastrophic preachings. They began planning for the end of the world together, using a grading system that classified people on a scale of light to dark. According to Chad, bright people were followers of Jesus Christ, but dark people were Satanists, even going as far as labeling her own daughter, Tylee, as a dark soul. Charles filed for divorce the next year, as he became increasingly concerned about Lori's unpredictable and incomprehensible behavior. Lori threatened to murder her husband and isolated him from the family on multiple occasions in an attempt to portray him as a villain. She also allegedly told Charles that she no longer cared about him or JJ before fleeing with both Tylee and JJ. Unfortunately, Charles was murdered a few months later by Lori's brother, Alex Cox, at the Arizona home she shared with her children. After accusing Charles of abusing his sister, Alex shot him 4 times in the chest. He then told police that Charles had struck him first with a baseball bat to the head and that he had used a gun in self-defense. According to the autopsy report, investigators also discovered that Alex neglected to perform CPR on Charles when 911 dispatchers told him to do so. The matter was later dismissed and Alex was not charged. Lori and her children relocated from Arizona to be closer to Chad in September 2019. The quartet lived in an apartment complex in Rexburg, Idaho, and Alex moved in next door to his sister. The string of deaths. JJ and Tylee went missing the same year. Tylee's last known photograph was taken on a trip to Yellowstone National Park with Lori, JJ, and Alex, according to police. Lori invented stories about her children's whereabouts in response to inquiries and worries from family. She told some family and friends that Tylee was visiting relatives, while others heard that she was attending BYU's Idaho campus. Lori also claimed JJ was staying with a close friend, Melanie Gibb, who later admitted to investigators that JJ had not been with her. Lori allegedly referred to her 2 children as zombies, according to Gibb. And in October 2019, Chad's then-wife, Tammy Daybell, died of natural causes in her sleep. However, investigators became suspicious of Tammy's death and suspected foul play, especially since Lori and Chad married barely 2 weeks later. An autopsy was never performed, despite the Daybell children's request. In December 2019, Alex then died of natural causes in Arizona. Tylee and JJ were also formally proclaimed missing by the Rexburg Police Department, prompting a countrywide probe into their disappearances. Officials identified Chad and Lori in Kauai, Hawaii on January 25, 2020, and served the latter with a court order demanding her to produce her children within 5 days. Lori was unable to comply with the injunction and was arrested on February 20, 2020. She was extradited to Idaho 2 weeks later. Despite the arrest, Tylee and JJ's whereabouts and safety remained unknown. Local officials examined Chad's home on June 9, 2020, and discovered the bodies of both children. JJ was buried under a tree, and Tylee was buried in the Daybell's pet cemetery. The charges timeline. On February 20, 2020, Lori was arrested by the Kauai Police Department in Princeville, Hawaii, and charged by the Madison County, Idaho State Attorney's Office with 2 felony counts of desertion and neglecting to care for dependent children. She was also charged with 3 misdemeanors: criminal solicitation to commit a crime and contempt of court. Her bail was set at $5 million. She later agreed to be extradited to Ohio to face her charges, and her bail lowered to $1 million. On March 2, 2020, NBC News reported on documents showing that Chad and Lori became convinced that Tylee and JJ were possessed and had become zombies. On May 1, 2020, Lori appeared at a court hearing in Rexburg and requested a $1 million bail reduction. The judge denied her request. At least 2 local bond companies were reportedly unwilling to work with her. On June 9, 2020, police executed a search warrant at Chad's home, where they discovered human remains buried in a purported pet cemetery. Chad was booked into jail later that day on obstruction or concealment of evidence. He was later charged with felony murder. On June 10th, his bail was set at $1 million. On July 2nd, prosecutors dropped 2 of the charges against Lori, 2 felony counts of desertion and non-support of dependent children, and instead charged her with obstruction or concealment of evidence in regards to her children's remains. On July 17, 2020, in light of 2 felony counts against Lori having been dropped, her bond was lowered by Madison County Judge Michelle Mallard. Judge Mallard decided to decrease bond to $50,000 US on each charge, totaling $150,000, but noted that Chad would still need to post $1 million in neighboring Fremont County to get out of jail. In addition to the bond reduction, a jury trial for the Madison County charges against Lori was set for January 25th through 29th, 2021. On May 25th, 2021, Chad and Lori were indicted on the charge of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder and grand theft by deception for the deaths of Tylee and JJ. Lori was charged with grand theft related to Social Security benefits for JJ and Tylee. Chad was charged with grand theft in connection with a life insurance policy he had for Tammy Daybell, of whom he was the beneficiary and received $430,000 after her death. He was also charged with her murder. Lori was additionally charged with conspiracy to murder Charles. Her case, however, was halted after a judge determined she was mentally unable to stand trial and referred her to treatment. A few months later, prosecutors announced that Chad would face the death penalty. He's currently imprisoned and awaiting his trial. On May 27, 2021, Lori was found incompetent and unfit to stand trial, and her case was stayed, but she has since been deemed competent to stand trial after mental health treatment. Lori was found mentally competent to stand trial by Judge Stephen Boyce on April 11, 2022. Lori refused to submit a plea to murder a few days later, causing her lawyers to enter a not guilty plea on her behalf. Chad has also pled not guilty on counts of murder, conspiracy, and grand theft. On May 26, 2022, the date of Lori's trial was changed from October 2022 to January 9, 2023, to ensure her and Chad Daybell would be tried together. In December 2022, Chad asked judges multiple times to separate his trial from Lori's, but was denied. Lori's trial was suspended for a second time due to incompetence. On November 15, 2022, Judge Boyce ruled Lori Vallow Daybell competent to stand trial, but no new trial date was set. On December 8th, the new trial date was set for April 3rd, 2023. On January 6th, the attorneys for Lori Vallow served a notice of alibi, claiming that Vallow was not present when the murder of her 2 children and Tammy Daybell occurred. Vallow claimed she was in her apartment with friends while the murder of her children happened in her brother Alex Cox's apartment. During the murder of Tammy Daybell, she claims to have been in Hawaii with 2 different friends. In the motion, her attorneys cite the case of Edmond versus Florida, which determined that someone who does not participate in a murder or attempt to kill someone cannot be given the death penalty. That's all for this video. I hope you liked it. And if you did, please like, share, and subscribe to see more videos. Until then, take care, and thanks for watching.